Hey there, it is Monday afternoon, and I thought I would make a quick video to talk about this thing right here. I actually mentioned this a few weeks ago, well, what I had done of it at that point, and I think that was like a few days after I actually did it. But I hadn't really had a chance to test it. Because, okay, when you're dealing with something new and you have to go through quite a bit of work in order to test it, it kind of, I don't know, makes you not want to do that right away. Because you've already put so much work into building the thing to begin with, and also thinking of the thing and thinking of different things. Like this thing here, I spent a full day messing around with the way this was working before I actually arrived at this. There has to be a dozen changes inside here. Like it's almost completely different from what it started from. Similar but different. Anyway, so what it is a quick release Vise mechanism. And the interesting thing about it is that it doesn't have a lead screw. And it's all wood. Like there aren't any metal parts other than screws and a 3/8 inch bolt that I use for a pivot. That's it. Everything else is wood. And the reason why I did this, and I know it's rough. The reason why I did this was just to test it. I did this yesterday afternoon in the quickest possible way I could. But it has to be done to the point where I can actually test it hard, like really test it. So the way it works, I'll get in closer after, but the way it works is it'll slide freely. The spindle slides freely after it's been loosened, and then you push it in and you start tightening it, and then you can really tighten down on it. Like I'm tightening down on that, and that has got a good, within limits of what I have here, because none of this is very stiff. This is 1/2 inch plywood for the jaws. I wrapped 1/2 inch plywood around the spindle, I guess you could call it, and that's pressing on the thing. So none of it's ideal, but it's showing me that it's working. So that's what I wanted to find out, whether this would work. All right, so I'm going to loosen it up again to show you that it slides back and forth again, like freely. And this starts back when I finished making these. All right, I made these. These are the long ones based on the power wedge idea. And at that time, I was also thinking about ways to make quick release vise. And one of the ideas I had for this, instead of a wedge, was what I wound up putting inside here. It was actually a hinged piece that I thought it was too complex for a clamp. And this would be a lot simpler, so this is what I went with. But basically what it is a hinged part that as you slide the thing back, you can lift up on it and it won't engage with the bar. It'll have the same sandpaper on it as this, but when you want to use it, you'll slide it ahead. It'll be sticking down then, and then you can start tightening, and it'll tighten and it'll grip on the bar. Okay, in exactly the same way as the wedge. However, I didn't use it for this, like I said, because I thought it was a little bit too mechanical. I thought it would be too bulky to incorporate. Right? I thought the wedge and the wedge is simpler. And I think overall, well, definitely it's easier to make. All right, but then I kept the idea, and I put it with this one here. Now the idea here is that this is not, there's no lead screw where the screw is, it's not actually a screw, it's an inclined plane. A screw is just an inclined plane, right, that wraps around a rod. So rather than have that on the thing, I've got it in here. On the back of this part right here is just 2 pieces of plywood that I very roughly cut, so that's not ideal either, and glued on there. And as the thing rotates, the part that sticks up with the sandpaper on the bottom presses against that ramp. So the tighter it gets, the more it grips the bar. Do you understand? And then as it goes up the ramp, it pulls the jaw in tighter. I mean, the idea is with any vise really, especially a woodworking one, because that's what this is meant to be, is that you just push it in tight to where it's supposed to be, and then you don't have a lot of turns that are needed to get it tightened up. Okay? So I've got a 360, and I'm at that right now, but that's because this thing really racks. Okay? So the final version would be more better. Okay? And then it releases there. But I wanted to get this done so I could test it, right? I want to make sure that when I go to build a final version that I'll base the plans on, that I'm not going to get burned again like I did with that last quick release vise that I went through all the trouble of building after doing some testing to begin with, only to find out that it broke and failed at a critical point. After I had all of the footage, all of the video shot, all of the plans made, I didn't want to go through the same thing here because this is slightly more complex. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the camera in so you can see how it works. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to take it apart slightly so you can see what's on the inside. All right, so the first thing to know is that this whole thing just slides right out. Okay, here's the square spindle. And to keep the jaw fairly parallel, I just cut a couple of pieces of hardwood as guide bars. I think that the final version of this would have 2 spindles that would be dual. I think that's the way it would work best. Right, and that way you wouldn't have as much as obstructions, and I think you would get the most out of the vise because it's just to take it both ends, slide it in, and then you can kind of, there'll be a little bit of play there. You can kind of independently tighten them. If you have the stock over to one side, you can tighten it really hard over there, just snug up the other one a little bit. Or, you know, if it's in the middle, snug up both of them. So there's that, which is just that 1/2-inch plywood, right? And the rest of it is screwed onto my bench, so I'm gonna have to take it off. But the first thing I'm gonna take off is this spring that I made from plywood. It's actually 1/2-inch, well, what was cut off 1/2-inch plywood, so it's about 1/8 of an inch thick, and it's just a spring. And what it does is it pushes down on the top of the part, the L-shaped part that has the sandpaper in it. And I'm going to pull that part out right now. And you can see how much of a how much of a Frankenstein it is, okay? There have been parts added to it and parts cut off, and wow. But here's the 3/8 bolt, which would be just a 3/8 round bar on the other one. And here's that L-shaped part with the sandpaper on the bottom that's glued on with epoxy. Okay, and so this part up here is what rubs against that circular ramp. All right, and you know, it goes in and it tightens, like it pushes on that and it tightens. That's the way that works. All right, my original thinking for this was some kind of Moxon vise, very much like I have here, thinking that it would have to be too big, too large, but I went in and I drew it up in SketchUp and I managed to miniaturize it somewhat. However, whenever you miniaturize something, you don't know for certain that it's going to work properly or it's going to work the same as a prototype. So that's the one that I have to actually build and test after I finish messing around with this. I've got other projects in between, so this is not coming anytime too soon. So I'm just going to pull off the inner job, which is just another piece of 1/2-inch plywood with a hole in it for the spindle. And then there's the box that the thing fits in, screwed down to my workbench, which I've lost respect for because I'm going to build a new workbench to replace it eventually. And here's that. Now, the one I drew up doesn't need this, but this one has this spring, another wooden spring, that keeps the thing forward so that it doesn't slide underneath the other spring and I can't unloosen it, okay? And then you can see in here is that circular ramp, which is really just 2 pieces of plywood cut into a half moon shape, and then, well, it's actually 1 piece. It can be cut from 1 piece, and then cut on an angle on the bandsaw, right? So that you wind up with very small here going up to fairly big over there. All right, it goes all the way around. You sand a little bit smoother, and it should work great. All right, it's not as complex as it looks. It's basically lay it out with a compass, cut it out on the bandsaw into the semicircular shape, and then cut it in half on the bandsaw after that. Okay? So yeah, that's it. Like, I say that's it as if it's no big deal, but there's a lot of messing around with this, I can tell you. Okay? So I'll just stick this in here if I can. All right, and then maybe I'll take the handle off of this because I don't need it. And then this goes through, and you can see the way this spring acts right here. It keeps this part in place even when it starts to ride up the ramp. See, it'll push back, right? And then when it comes around here to where the thing can actually go forward and loosen, what kicks that ahead is that angle cut on this spring. This is the way I handled this. I think it's going to be different in the actual build slightly, but this is fairly simple. And the reason for this spring is I added that little block on the top here. That's to keep pressure, to get that initial pressure on that L-shaped piece to press the sandpaper into the shaft so that it gets a grip. After that, after it has a grip, it starts riding up the ramp, and that takes over. That gives that pushes it in even tighter to the bar. So yeah, I'm really happy, really excited about this one. I think this one is interesting. Okay? And providing I can make it rugged enough, I think it would be, pretty much the thing to have in your workshop for a woodworking vise, because it's so quick. Right? Just slide it ahead, tighten it up, and away you go.
You're out. Finished at Faber, expelled. I want you off this campus at 9 o'clock Monday morning. And I'm sure you'll be happy to know that I have notified your local draft boards and told them that you are now all eligible for military service.